So today we get the EU giving what you call marching orders to Michel Barnier, so giving him his remit, his negotiating brief. This is what you want from the transition arrangement. What is your message then when it comes to transition?
So ultimately we need transition as soon as possible, ideally within this quarter, certainly in terms of the companies that we deal with. The greater the clarity, the sooner the clarity, and the greater the sense of the direction that we're going in, the better it is for customers, for clients, for shareholders and for employees.
You make the point that the EU needs to set out their vision of what they want in the relationship with the UK afterwards. From the rhetoric that we've had lately, and I can only go off the rhetoric, it is really the emphasis from the EU seems to be it's up to you, the UK, to define what it is that you want afterwards. Passporting, I assume, is off the table. First of all, is that your base case assumption? And why do you think it's up to... Why do you not think it's more up to you to define the relationship rather than the EU?
So passporting comes with membership of the single market, and it's quite clear from the UK side and indeed from the conversations that we've had in member states and in Brussels that seems to be off the table. So the question is, what do you replace that with? So and that then depends on, are you prioritising the politics of Brexit or are you prioritising the economics of Brexit? And that's a conversation that we have on both sides of the channel, and it really depends where that individual or that institution that you're speaking to is coming from. If you're prioritising the economics, you're looking at what's the regulatory relationship, what's the trading relationship, and how do you do that with a minimum amount of dislocation and disruption.
Yeah. I mean, Miles, just in terms of this transition period, though, I've just pulled out one of the lines from your press release. If we can't get clarity on transition early this year, business will have to assume a disorderly Brexit and accelerate contingency plans to protect their customers and clients. If you're talking about board members with fiduciary duties towards shareholders, when is it too late? Is it already too late to make these decisions?
There's no cut-off point for the entire industry, so there's no sort of secret calendar somewhere, hidden away in various cupboards or risk committees where everybody has the same date. It will depend on how you're structured, what you already have on the continent. It will depend on your risk appetite. So there's a variety of factors. So some companies have already and have publicly already moved operations or individuals into the continent. Others are looking at it. Others will move at certain points. So it really depends on the individual institution. But if you're looking for the critical mass, I would say sooner at the start of this year, the better.
David?
Can we talk about the use of the city by EU firms? How big is the pool of services that they require that can only be delivered in the city in the short term, and how quickly, under a set of arrangements which is not very favourable to financial services trade, would those services be developed in the key hubs inside the EU, in Frankfurt, in Paris and in Dublin?
So, I mean, as you'll know, this is bundle, so it's very difficult to take certain things and go, right, that's purely European or that's purely international or whatever it is. But the studies that we've commissioned show that about 20 to 25% of the activity that happens in UK financial services is related in one form or other to Europe. How quickly do you shift that? Well, actually, the question here is, where do you go other than Europe? If you look at, as you will well know, David, if you look at where economic growth is coming from, where clients increasingly want to book business, it's actually not in Europe, it's in Asia, and to a degree it's in the United States. So what Brexit is doing, and if we're not careful, what Brexit will merely accelerate, is a move out of Europe as a whole. So this is one of the reasons why maintaining the critical mass within the broader European financial market is so critical.
And do Europeans buy that argument, do they?
Yes,
they don't think that's just a negotiating tactic that the UK is bound to say?
I think at the start, some of them did think that was just a negotiating tactic, or the industry would say that. I think as they've seen where jobs have moved to and where activity has moved to, I think it's very clear. And EY do a fantastic Brexit tracker, which goes to show where jobs are going. And the other thing that absolutely underpins is there's no single place in Europe where these jobs are going. It's fragmenting, which is exactly what we said would happen at the end of 2016.
Which takes us sort of very nicely back to the Macron interview with Andrew Marr. They touched on a number of different things. Passporting was one of them. But also there was this discussion about the risk of the EU being cut off from London's financial markets, and everything that you've just said. This is what he said on passporting. But therein lies that using that as a placard to the Europeans. Is that really the smartest and most genuine way to create good debate about how to come up with a solution?
Well, we are not going down the route of fog-on-channel continent cut-off from UK financial services, but there is a risk.
Bad leaves on Eurostar line.
All over.
Money won't make it.
But there is a risk of this. There is a risk of this. If you look at where financing comes from in Europe, we are about 40 to 50% of Europe's financial services activity in the UK. If you look at where financing for European companies comes from, often a German manufacturer that goes to their branch in Dusseldorf to get a loan doesn't realise that actually a lot of the back end of that deal is happening in London. You know, they're just seeing the front end. So the connectivity to UK financing, driving European growth and prosperity is absolutely critical.